Hello again, everyone. I'm Dr. George Simon, and welcome to another live edition of Character Matters, a program where we talk about what I consider to be the defining issue of our time, the character crisis that we have faced for several decades now, and that affects every aspect of our lives, from our community relations to our international relations, our politics, and most especially our more intimate relationships. Every aspect of human life is impacted by the character issue. And as I've said many times, we human beings have always had our character related challenges. We are not inherently wonderful beings. We have to develop character over time and with just the right kind of coaching and in the right kind of environment. It's a painstaking task and it takes a lot of dedication and it takes a lot of the right ingredients. Unfortunately, it seems like we've forgotten not only what it takes, but we've forgotten the importance of that task. And so all manner of character disturbances, once thought outrageous or even unthinkable, all manners of display of really poor character have become very commonplace, have almost become normalized, so that even when we witness behaviors and manners of operating that would normally have turned our stomachs, so to speak, in years past, now get a pass, sometimes even championed, sometimes even rewarded and promoted. And so we find ourselves in the state that we're in, where character doesn't matter so much anymore. We barely know how to foster it, we barely know how to judge it, and all of our relationships are taking a beating, basically, because of this fact. And today I would like to talk just a little bit about how we turn things around. Because so many of the institutions, especially the faith enterprises that have existed for some time, so many of these institutions and vehicles for personal and character development, for spiritual growth, etc., so many of these enterprises have largely failed in their primary mission. So I want to talk about the how of the changes that we need to make as opposed to the what. Many of us agree about what needs to happen to turn things around. The question is how. And one thing we are not going to do, and I'd like to see some discussion about this. One thing we're not going to do is change any hearts or minds with divisive rhetoric, with basically putting information out there that says basically to another person how misguided they are or how superior one point of view is over another. This has never changed a single human mind or human heart. These kinds of divisions have been growing among us for a long time and seem to be only getting worse. And that's why we're not really solving any problems because we're not meeting each other in the proper manner. We're not putting something above our petty perspectives and our points of view. Same thing happens in relationships many times. If we really want to make things better, we have to come together. And it's the how. It's the loving coming together that is so missing. Um, I see some folks are trying to enter the waiting room, but have not been able to. So I'm going to tend to that momentarily here for just a second. Here we go. Someone's trying to enter the waiting room so that they can join the conversation live. But I think they have the wrong link. You can find the link at drgeorgesimon.com. Just paste the link you see scrolling at the bottom of the screen, or go to my latest blog post at drgeorgesimon.com. You'll find the links there in the article. You can also go to the Character Matters page on the blog and find the links there. Either one of those links, or you can even go to the description on YouTube on this current video, and you'll find the link there to enter the waiting room and converse live. So let me talk a little bit more while we're waiting for some folks to enter the room and talk live with me. Let me mention one of the things that happens in relationships that makes it difficult to grow positively within a relationship, to build greater degrees of intimacy. You know, in our ego, we want to be validated. We want to think we have it right, and we want to think that our perspective on things is the right perspective. And many times, what we try to do is convince our partners that that they're misguided, that they need to see things our ways. And this really doesn't help matters. Once again, I'm going to interrupt myself and respond to someone who's trying to get in the waiting room. There we go. I'm going to invite someone into the studio here in just a minute who's been trying to get in. There we go. Now maybe they'll be able to get in and join the conversation, because they might have something really a benefit to add when it comes to relationships. Now, of course, there are those relationships where one party in the relationship is significantly character impaired. And when this happens, it's very, very hard to meet on equal terms, because one person actually does have a significant problem. Perhaps they know it and just don't want to admit it. Perhaps they don't fully realize it. Whatever the case is, however, when someone is truly character impaired, when their very way of seeing and doing things is a problem in itself, then that requires modification if the relationship is going to be a success. So I see that we did get the link to work here for Caroline, who wants to join the conversation. So hang on just a minute. Welcome. We're getting an echo there. Not sure how to fix that.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Is it still there?
No, I don't think it's... Well, yep, it is. Sorry. I'm trying to do something about that.
Let me see if it's on my end.
Well, I'm still hearing it. Perhaps what you need to do is log out and or I'll remove you from the stage and then you can log back in.
Perfect.
Thank you. All right. Well, hopefully we can get that problem resolved and get back together. Caroline always has some good comments to make and some good questions to ask. Um, I'm looking at the chat where you can ask your questions and make comments. And right now, I'm seeing nothing but some greetings. And so let me pass those greetings back on to all those who are in the chat. As I was mentioned just a moment ago, though, as I was mentioning, in some cases, you really can't meet um, on level playing terms because someone's very way of being, someone's very way of seeing things and doing things is in itself problematic, unhealthy. And in those cases, confronting that is absolutely necessary. Once again, however, it's in the how. I call the art of that the art of benign confrontation, which means that it has to be clear when you confront dysfunctional behavior, negative, hurtful, spiteful attitudes. When you confront those things, you do so relatively dispassionately, genuinely lovingly, wanting only a positive outcome, but standing firm, and mostly standing firm on principle. It's not a battle of will, and it's not a battle of ego. It's a matter of principle. We have to stand on principle. This is so crucial. And there are some things in which we can't back down. When it does a disservice to everyone to back down. So it's not so much the what in these kinds of troubled relationships, it's the how things are approached. Once again, I'm going to add Caroline to the stage, and I hope things go better this time. I don't hear an echo. But maybe that's because
I muted myself, so maybe that helped.
Well, I'm not hearing an echo at all right now.
Super.
I think we're good.
Perfect.
Yeah. So we've been talking about dysfunctional relationships a little bit. And I was saying earlier that in most cases, with respect to the divisions that we see in our society and the difficulties we seem to have these days communicating with one another, especially about matters, sensitive matters like political issues, et cetera, it seems hard to have an honest, loving conversation, one that is not judgmental and one that is not purely egoic and basically tries to tell the other person how misguided they are and how superior our viewpoint is to theirs. These kinds of things go nowhere. And I was talking about the need for a much different kind of discourse. But I was also making the point that in relationships where one person truly has a serious character disturbance, that is, when their very way of seeing things and doing things, their very manner of operating within relationships, their very way of dealing with the world, their very opinion of themselves, all those things are a problem in themselves. And that makes meeting on level ground very difficult. And that makes meeting without judgment very difficult. And so, what I was saying is that in those cases, sometimes many things have to be confronted, but it's the how more so than anything else that makes all the difference. I've spent a professional lifetime not only working with individuals who had the unfortunate circumstances of being in a relationship with a character impaired person and suffering the emotional consequences of that. But I've also spent a professional career dealing with people with character disturbances. And I can tell you that it is true that that kind of work is extraordinarily difficult and the success rate is not very good. In some cases, it's nearly impossible. But the biggest reason most folks don't find success when they pursue traditional avenues of help for a troubled relationship where someone is character impaired, the biggest reason for the lack of success has to do with the orientation and the mode of operation within therapy. And that's what causes people to experience what we call iatrogenic or therapy induced trauma, where the person going for help feels worse for the effort, worse than they did before. And what I learned in all my years of experience dealing with character disturbance is that the how is the most important part. It's not what needs to be confronted. That ought to be, especially if you're in a skilled professional's office, that ought to be a given. The what, understanding the what is wrong, what the nature of character dysfunction is, that ought to be a given. If it's not a given, you probably need to seek help somewhere else. More important is the how the problem behaviors and the problem attitudes are addressed. And the art of benign confrontation is a true art. I'm going to add good old Brent here to the conversation as well, too. Welcome, Brent. Good to see you.
Same here. Same here.
So I'm going to speak a little bit about the how of benign confrontation and what I learned in my work with disturbed characters. I learned very quickly that I could say almost anything. I didn't even have to have all the right words. And I could confront even the most sensitive and even the most prickly behaviors without any problem once I mastered the how of doing it. And that is not without judgment. Judgment is essential. Some things in life simply can't be okay. Some behaviors, if you're morally grounded, if you're rooted in principle, some things just simply can't be tolerated. So it's not a matter of no judgment either. It's a matter of how you display it. Standing firm yourself and modeling loving behavior and expecting it and coaching it, promoting it, and especially reinforcing it when you manage to solicit the same loving behavior from another. So it's all a matter of the process. Love heals, it inherently heals. The real deal, not all the things that masquerade as love or that we mistake for love. The real deal heals. And that's because I think that the character love is inherently healing. It's inherently unitive. It's inherently heartwarming. It's inherently heart opening. How does a heart not open? How is a closed or hardened heart ever transformed? It's impossible. The first thing a heart has to be is open. And so when you could, I remember talking to a very powerful person of stature, of wealth, power, and influence, who needed basically to be confronted on their level of egoism and narcissism. And I really struggled for several moments with how to address the fact. And it wouldn't surprise anybody that when I did broach the subject as gently as I could, the immediate reaction was not open. But I persisted. And I also persisted in a way that suggested that there really was no point in the encounter unless there were at least some degree of openness to what I was trying to confront. And when that was on the table, and that was on the table without spite or condemnation, but just plain facing facts, slowly but surely, we did some work. What turned out to be really good work. And I remember the day I had actually given the person an article to read on the topic of narcissism and its many variants. And I actually remember the day that the person came in, article in hand, said, I wanted to throw this in the trash. Of course. But I saw myself in it. And we got to work. And we formed a bond. So it's not a matter of what you confront. It's a matter of the how. And I've tried to carry that same message in workshops all over the country when I was doing them, hundreds of them, to clinicians everywhere, so that they wouldn't end up being just another one of those clinicians who unwittingly introduced what we call therapy-induced trauma into their encounters with people who had gone to them for help. So anyway, I've said my spiel about that. I think the reason I'm so passionate about it these days, two reasons. One, the divisions among us have grown to a truly destructive level. And second, we have become tolerant of the unthinkable. We're so troublingly used to the most egregious displays of poor character that we've become troublingly used to it, numb to it. Not only that, if somebody says all the right things, I saw a post today on Facebook. I'm not going to mention the specifics. I saw a post today on Facebook where someone was lauding someone for saying all the right things to a targeted group of people. Astute, I don't want to just say con people, because con men and con women are a particular variety. But there are a lot of folks, demagogues, positive impression managers. There are a lot of folks who know just what to say to win your favor. There are a lot of folks who know how to read the audience, the climate, the temperature of the room, and know just what to say and just what to do. And if we regard that as the test of character, as opposed to the actions that somebody displays over time, then I know it sounds a little callous, but we almost deserve the exploitation that we receive, because we equate just the profession of oh gosh, I'm searching for words today. We regard somebody's claim basically as authentic without bearing personal witness to anything that backs it up. We used to know how to vet character, and we also were committed to caring about it enough that we never turned ourselves over, whether it's to someone who wants to govern us or someone who wants to be in a relationship with us. We seem to have known better at one time not to turn ourselves over to someone with an impaired conscience, with an impaired sense of empathy, and who could easily do great harm. We at one time seemed to know better than that. And what pains me in our day and time is that even people who do know better don't seem to want to hold fast to the principle of never affording power or influence to a person of bad character. I see you nodding your head, Brad. Do you want to echo that in any way?
Yeah, sure. No problem. Are you hearing me
I
okay?
am.
Okay,
Yes.
great. Yes. Um, just that last part that you were talking about there. A person can listen to these sentiments being expressed and they can say, yes, we need to have good character. So I'm saying they will mentally assent to what you're saying. But it's quite another story to now put that into action and do that on a consistent basis, right?
Mhm.
Um, Here's the truth. If you start to do the things that are the real aspects of character, sharing and especially sacrificing, which is a very important part of character, right? Um, in the Bible says preferring one above yourself, right?
Mhm.
Those things are foreign in modern times, but the moment you practice it, you may look weird. Some person may take advantage of you. And I'll keep it short here for now. Living these beliefs. So I'm saying I like yourself. I have seen people who agree to these tenets, but when it's time to actually live them, that's where the problem is.
Yes.
So I'll
Yeah.
pause there for now.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's an old saying, right? That actions speak louder than words. Your actions will reveal the truth, whereas your words can easily cast a false impression. I'm reminded also of a situation. I'll share this. Actually, a similar circumstances to the one I'm going to describe. A similar circumstance has occurred many, many times during my counseling career. I was talking with a person who mentioned that they were very curious at the outset of their relationship with a person. They were very curious about their past relationship history, but that person never wanted to talk about it. And as a matter of fact, when the subject was broached, they would get very combative and say, that's in the past. We don't need to go there. You don't need to know about that. Now is now. And so, therefore, they were basically saying, there's no need for you to vet my history. Baloney. There's every reason to vet someone's history. That's part of vetting their character. It's natural for people to put on the best face at the beginning of a relationship. It's natural for folks to want to seduce and charm to some extent. Some people are incredibly good at that. The history counts. And honesty about that history counts too. So that's a huge red flag. Almost immediately, when someone says, we're not going to talk about my relationship history, bingo, the flag should go up immediately. And you should know there's probably a reason. Probably a reason he or she doesn't want you to know, and that reason's probably not a very good one. I don't know if you have anything to add to that, Caroline. I saw you smiling at that just a bit.
No, it just made me chuckle. I really like what you said about judgment. That judgment is needed because I think in this day and age, judgment is often has a negative connotation with it, like we're not allowed to judge. And
Right.
you're saying no, like good judgment is needed in order to vet somebody's character. And I really like that because I do believe there is something positive about judgment. It connects us to our instinct, our gut feeling. And there's a real positive side to judgment, and that we have not only the right, but maybe also almost the obligation to vet somebody for our own safety and protection. And then I also liked that you pretty much encourage to go into the confrontation, into the fight, which also I think in these times has, like almost a negative connotation.
Yeah.
And you're like, no, fight is good. Confrontation, it's good. It's not trying to avoid the fight. It's how to fight well. Like, as I understand, with certain human rules, or as you say, with certain openness or love, right?
Yeah.
One question that I have though is, you talked about, that openness, that love to the other person, that the confrontation, the how should come from there, if I understood that correctly.
Right.
But how do you do that? Like, for example, if somebody has a character disturbance, I find them often very unappealing, very unlikable, very like, I really don't like this person. So, how do
Right.
you overcome that to be truly open to address something that you think needs to be addressed for your own maybe sake and protection? That it comes from an honest place. How do you, like, you just retreat for half an hour and say, I'm coming back? And how do you
Right.
work from this to
Yeah.
this?
That's a great question. And this is something I address in my book, In Sheep's Clothing, in a whole chapter. You have to make clear what the terms of engagement with you are, what the rules are. And you don't have to red flag that. You don't have to beat that over anybody's head. You just have to make it clear what's expected, how they have to talk to you, what kind of respect they need to show, what kinds of boundaries they need to observe in the fight if you're trying to work something out. You can make all those things clear by your manner of engagement. Make all the rules clear. One of the biggest and most effective ways to set that boundary and limit is to completely disengage when a person's way of trying to have their way gets out of bounds. In other words, when they become insulting or overly aggressive, or where they become demeaning or whatever, that's the time to withdraw engagement. You don't have to spell out the rule. It gets spelled out with your behavior. In other words, I don't engage with people who insult me or, or who demean me or who won't listen. Uh, what's the point? You can make that clear with your behavior. People think when I talk about setting these terms of engagement that they have to broadcast them. No, you don't. Everything's displayed with your own behavior. And I've said this in workshops too, many times with clinicians. Silence sometimes can be a really powerful tool, a very, very powerful tool. No engagement at all, unless the manner of engagement changes. They get the message. They get the message relatively quickly. And I think we need to be prepared to reinforce that when it happens, to make it clear that we are responsive to and that we appreciate the person's willingness to take a different tack, to do things a different way.
I'd like to suggest something also, because that's a really interesting question that Caroline asked. Indeed, I think it's one that we struggle with. And what you're saying, what you said earlier, Dr. Simon, I consider that the postgraduate work of character building, which is engaging a person who may be angry at you or attacking you, and just being calm, you're not returning the offense. But as you said it, confronting a person in a loving way, a truly loving way. And of course, loving, there's a lot of fluffy things passing as love, of course, but
Right. Right.
love meaning really seeking the other person's interest.
Yeah. Love can be pretty tough. It doesn't necessarily have to be fluff. Often
Right.
it isn't. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
There you go.
It
Right.
has more it has more to do with the willing of well for another and willing of well for a situation. If you want things to go well for a person in their life, and if you want an encounter to go well, there have to be certain rules, um, not only accepted but implemented. It's just the way it is. We can't just be. I used a word in some of the workshops that is such an outdated term. I called someone a palooka.
I don't know what that is.
A palooka was an old term for a kind of a punch drunk fighter who would get in the ring and just start swinging away wildly without any discipline, without any fancy footwork. All they knew was how to get in the ring and swing. That's it. And guess what usually happened to them? Usually they got knocked out quite quickly and often, and that unfortunately damaged their brains, and they ended up what people referred to as a palooka, just a kind of what we used to say a punch drunk fighter who just never learned any better how to impose some rules on themselves, how to observe certain principles. Because if you're going to take a risk in that kind of a situation, even risk your life, if you're not going to obey some pretty strict rules, you're going to get hurt. And that's really what loving engagement is all about. It's about observing the terms of engagement that keep everybody safe and allow for things to be worked out to the benefit of everybody.
Right.
Yeah.
I have a question. You spoke a lot about, about the how to confront, how to go into the fight, doing it with love, right?
Right.
But with love for whom? For love to oneself or love for the other person? So let's say, for example,
You can't have one without the other.
but let's say, for example, the other person is very not open to any feedback and but you feel you need it for yourself. So in that case, you would almost do it more for yourself, as opposed to, for example, another time where you really don't feel like going into a fight. You're exhausted, maybe you're depressed, but you
Exactly.
really feel like it would benefit the other person. And so you would really truly do it for the benefit of the other person. But like, I think one case is more you do it for yourself, and I think that's also valid, but like, or is it just love general, whatever love you can come up with?
There's the golden rule. What you would do is what you would have done to you. What if you weren't in a space where your heart was open at the time? What if something was going on in your life, or you just experienced a trauma, or whatever the case may be? So you're just not open right now. Now's not the right time. Now's not the right situation to be confronted about anything for one reason or another. What would you wish that another person do to respect you and your situation at that moment? What would you want them to do?
Yeah, but I don't think I can, project myself onto other people just because I would want to be treated in a certain way. I don't think that necessarily means another person would want to be treated that way if they were in the same situation. You know what I mean? I feel like we're getting into the field of assumption.
Right. And I guess if you're going to be a purist about it, and you want to get it 100% right every time, that would be a consideration. I think what I'm trying to say is that sometimes we're just in a position for one reason or another, whether something has recently happened, whether we've got something churning inside that's keeping us, whether we're still suffering the effects of a wound that's too raw, whatever the case may be, at the moment, we just can't be open. We just can't. And in those times, most of us wish that perhaps another time, another place, another situation, things might be different. But for right now, it's hands off. And I
But
respect that.
But
So,
isn't that mostly the case for people with character disturbances, that it's never the right time for them because that is the character disturbance, that they
no,
don't want to work
no,
on them? No, it's not like that.
no, that's not the issue. The issue is not that there is a right or a wrong time. With most people with character disturbances, they don't find a reason, a sufficient reason to even consider changing their outlook or their modus operandi. Either it's working for them too well, at least as they see it, they're getting too much of what they want in life or what matters to them at this point in their life, or they're too stubborn or too prideful, or whatever the case may be. They are not open because they still are too fond of themselves, their opinions, and how they're doing things to have any motivation to change. And a good therapist has to respect that, has to respect that. And that's why the don't you see approach is just a complete disaster. And that's what many therapists unfortunately fall into the trap of. And some therapists, even some online people, advertise that they make headway. I know they don't. This is just not true. That they make headway in basically reasoning with folks and using the "don't you see" approach. In some cases, in some cases, where character disturbance is mild and is mostly of a more neurotic character because the person has a pretty well developed conscience and therefore they have a bunch of ego defense mechanisms in place. In some cases, yeah, that approach might work. But in most cases today, with the levels of character disturbance that we see and the types of character disturbances that we see, most of the time, most of the time, that kind of approach is futile. but you can show respect for where a person is. And in all my books, I have mention of several folks who I just basically said, you know, it's not the time for us to work. It's just not time. You're still thinking everything's just pretty fine, and it's everybody else that's all screwed up. So if that's the case, if you don't really feel you need me right now, except maybe as a shoulder to cry on, but then not do anything differently, maybe we should just part company right now. And you come and see me when you come to the conclusion that maybe, that just maybe, something about you needs to change. And my door is open. And you'd be surprised how many people come a knocking 5, 6, 7 years later. You'd be surprised. And you'd also be pretty edified at how ready they are to work when they finally do knock on the door. Because for whatever reason, something has happened within their life that convinces them, maybe I do need to change some things. And, maybe that doctor, maybe he had a point. And because, and this sounds egoic, it's not meant to be at all. They, I think, sometimes say to themselves that because that doctor or that therapist saw it and took the time and the courage to call it out, even though I wasn't ready, because they pegged it accurately, I think I could trust them going back now and getting to work. And that lays the foundation for everything.
I definitely have a comment here, and very much based on Caroline's earlier question, right, about how do you approach persons who are generally character disturbed. As she says, in many cases, it seems like no time is the best time. Now, like the truth is, persons like that get very defensive, Well, let's say it this way, because this, I guess, what Dr. Simon has been saying for the majority of today. There's a way to do it. The how you do it is so important. If they ever sense that there is an attempt to make them feel bad, or even if they take it, even if you don't mean it, you're going to get resistance. But I want to talk quickly about the whole idea of time, because essentially what you just said there, Dr. Simon, is persons who know better have to understand the value of time in approaching persons with character disturbance, right? Sometimes in a more novice state, I would have been, well, we have to solve this now. Now that I'm a more mature, I'm realizing there's so many things that has to happen before that person is even open to hear what you have to say. And as you said, this is key in what you just said, your last response. At some point, you have to confront it lovingly, say it as it is, then maybe leave it alone.
Yes.
Now, that person is going to have some more experiences. They may forget about you at that point in time. They're going to have some more experiences where they get more problems with other people. And some years later, when they start to do the accounting, they may say, something is really wrong with me. But I remember somebody saying that 5 years ago.
Yes.
And that is part of the maturing process for people, that we have to understand the work of dealing with character disturbance it takes a lot. It's not going to be immediate.
Yeah.
You need
Brent,
patience and all that.
Brent, I want to echo what you just said there. You use some words. Wisdom has a funny way of speaking sometimes. You use some words. You said that in the process of maturing, basically, that so many things have to happen before a certain point in readiness. It's just like when a child is developing. So many things have to happen with regard to language and understanding language and having certain experiences and understanding the nature of those experiences before you could even have a conversation about certain things. So many things have to happen before that. And developmentally, morally, character wise, so many people today are in their infancy.
Yes.
Not enough maturation has happened. They're just not ready. And you can't make them be ready.
Can't.
You can't snap your fingers and just say it's going to happen. Some things just have to happen. Maybe some greater failures, maybe just some more failures, maybe some more troubled relationships. That's unfortunately, that's the name of the game today. People are maturing in their 50s and 60s and 70s. That's when people are maturing. And once again, I'm on my soapbox. A large part of that, not all of it, but a large measure of that has to do with the degree to which we've forgotten all that it takes to help shape decency of character. The time, the attention, the right kind of time, the right kind of intention, the right kind of attention, the right kind of guidance, the right kinds of principles to not only preach but model. All the stuff that it takes, we've forgotten. And so basically, people have been thrown to the world, the wolves, and they do their best at raising themselves. And as we human beings tend to do, they get misguided at various stages in their life because they're trying to find direction, but they don't have a clear sense of it yet. And so they come to the table underdeveloped, immature in their moral character development. They're just not ready. And they're especially not ready for a wholesome relationship, which is why we have one of the worst records on the earth for relationships holding it together. It should be a cause for incredible concern, but it's just kind of accepted. And that's what I think is really the sorriest statement about our time. I said earlier that all manners of character display and behavior, once outrageous, unthinkable, have become so commonplace and so normalized, and we become so uncomfortably used to them that we've lost our sense of outrage about them. We've lost our sense of outrage about the situation we find ourselves in and what we really need to do to turn things around. But I'm going to keep talking about it, and we'll keep having these live broadcasts. We're going to start doing a better job of getting the word out, and not only that, but getting the mechanisms more easily found so that people can participate in the discussion. Because for some reason, and we haven't figured this all out yet, Brent, you and I may have to have a conversation about this, but our our initial live broadcasts were garnering in the neighborhood of 300 to 500 live participants at one time. And now that's much lower. Now the after viewership is higher, so we'll have to look at that too. But there's something we're not quite doing right. I'm not sure what it is. And as you very well know, Brent, my experience with social media experts has not been great. It's been expensive, but it's not been very great or profitable. So we are looking into that, I promise the audience. and we will do better at that, because this is it. This is the venue, and I'm not traveling the country anymore. I thought about it briefly. Some offers were kind of tempting, but I neither have the voice nor the stamina anymore to do it. So this is going to have to be the forum. So once again, I thank you both for being part of the conversation today. And I encourage everyone to tune in again next time for the next live edition of Character Matters, the first and the third Wednesday of the month at noon Central Daylight Time. That's 10 a.m. on the West Coast, 11 a.m. Mountain Time, and 1 p.m. Eastern Time. And I'll see everyone again next time on the next live edition of Character Matters. Till then, take care, everyone. Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Bye-bye.
Bye,
Bye.
friends. Bye, George.
Bye.